Thank you for tuning in to Module 8 in the 2025 Municipal Affairs Election Training Program. This module will focus on election offenses and controverted elections. As a disclaimer, this video is intended as an introduction and overview of some of the things you need to know as a returning officer. This presentation does not provide a comprehensive review of the legislation and is not legal advice. If you have questions about how the legislation applies to specific facts, make sure to get advice from your legal counsel. If you watched our previous presentations, you already know that our 2025 training will be delivered in pre-recorded videos and posted to the Municipal Affairs website throughout the election year. If you haven't watched these presentations, please take some time to do so. In Module 8, we'll be talking about election offenses and controverted elections. A special ballot video will also be posted later this summer. In addition, the elections database videos provided by our information services team are up on our election resources page, along with specialized returning officer training for summer villages. This module will help returning officers to understand the controverted elections provisions, as well as the various offenses set out in the LAEA. We'll discuss parts 5 and 6 of the LAEA before getting into Election Alberta's authority to investigate and enforce offenses relating to election finances and contributions disclosure, and offenses relating to third-party advertising as well. Please keep in mind again that this is just an overview of the legislation. You should also take some time to read the relevant parts of the LAEA yourself. The term controverted election refers to when the validity or legality of an election is challenged. It's important for returning officers to have at least a high-level understanding of how this process works, even though returning officers will not have any involvement in the process, aside from maybe being a witness. A candidate, an elector, or an elected authority, either a municipal council or a school board, may contest the validity of an election of a member of an elected authority or the validity of a vote on a bylaw or question, pursuant to the rules in Part 5 of the Local Authorities Election Act. These are legal proceedings in the Court of King's Bench, so anyone involved in an application for an order controverting an election should get legal advice. A voter, candidate, or elected authority has up to 6 weeks to initiate an action against a person for bribery or undue influence under Part 5. A deposit must be made, and an affidavit must be given outlining reasonable grounds for contesting the election. The applicant must outline all the grounds of objection to the validity of the election complained against. The applicant must also file all affidavits, material on which the person intends to rely, and the names of any witnesses. There are 2 offenses under Part 5 of the Local Authorities Election Act: bribery and undue influence. Bribery involves granting or promising a reward, office, employment, money, or property to any person to influence that person or any other person's vote. It can also include the person accepting a bribe to vote a certain way, to not vote at all, to become a candidate, decide not to run for office, or to withdraw their candidacy. The second offense under this part is undue influence. Undue influence may involve threats against a person to influence that person's or any other person's vote. Threats may involve intimidation, the use of force, violence or restraint, or threats of injury, damage, harm, or loss for the purpose of influencing the outcome of the election. Penalties for bribery and undue influence under this part of the Act may include a fine of up to $5,000 or imprisonment for up to 2 years, or both. Also the loss of the seat and being disqualified from running for office until after 2 general elections following any conviction. Section 6 of the Local Authorities Election Act explains several offenses or breaches of the legislation. The next few slides will cover some of these and will give you a general idea of what they involve. However, as always, you should read the relevant sections of the LAEA to ensure you understand these provisions. The first set of offenses relates to ballots, ballot boxes, and the process of voting. As you can see from this list, ballot and voting offenses essentially relate to fraud or deceit in the context of an election. And the penalties for these types of offenses can be quite severe. Section 49 lists the offences involving the actions or inactions of returning officers or deputies. These offences all involve willfully doing or neglecting to do something in contravention of the Act. So these offences are not about inadvertent mistakes or omissions. Section 150 covers offences generally involving the integrity of the vote, such as interfering with an elector while they are voting, leaving material or writing something in the voting compartment, communicating how someone voted, or directly or indirectly inducing an elector to show their marked ballot. Part 6 also addresses offences involving candidates and campaigning, and these are just a few examples. The first is when someone falsely signs a candidate's acceptance statement on Form 4. For example, someone signs the form swearing or affirming they are eligible to run for office when they are in fact ineligible. Of course, as you know, the returning officer can only refuse a candidate's nomination papers for the reasons outlined in Section 28 sub 4. So issues around eligibility, even if a returning officer is aware there might be a problem, aren't something that a returning officer can investigate or use as a basis for rejecting a nomination. However, the returning officer should make candidates aware of the eligibility criteria and emphasize that signing a false statement is an offense. Keep in mind that the main role of the returning officer is to remain neutral and to facilitate the election process. The other offenses to be aware of are under sections 152 and 152.1. It is an offense to display or distribute campaign advertising material or to canvass or solicit votes, not only within a building used for a voting station, but also within the boundaries of land on which a building used for a voting station is located. Returning officers have the authority under these sections to remove any offending ads or signs and to issue directions to anyone actively campaigning to stop or to leave the location. If the person does not comply with the returning officer's directions, they may be guilty of an offense and liable to a fine of up to $500. The returning officer may also request the assistance of a peace officer to help maintain unobstructed public access to a voting station, or to remove a person who has refused to comply with the returning officer's directions. As always, we recommend reviewing the Local Authorities Election Act and other related materials to ensure that you are aware of the various offenses set out by the legislation and how they may be enforced. If the Local Authorities Election Act does not explain how a particular offense is to be prosecuted, the offense would follow the processes under the Provincial Offences Procedure Act. The offense may be brought forward to the police agency in the municipality, and that agency would then be responsible for reviewing, potentially investigating, and ultimately determining if charges would be laid pursuant to the Local Authorities Election Act. Breaches of Parts 5.1 and 8 of the Local Authorities Election Act are within the jurisdiction of Elections Alberta. The Election Commissioner has authority pursuant to Section 191 of the LAEA to investigate any matter that might constitute an offence under Part 5.1 or 8. The investigation may be initiated by Elections Alberta by its own initiative or at the request of another person or organization. And that concludes Module 8. Please remember to review our additional election resources online and visit the forms page for PDF versions of election forms. If you have questions about school board elections, please contact Alberta Education. Updated versions of the MGA and LAEA can be accessed or ordered through the King's printer, and questions about the elections database can be sent to our information services team.